Hello, this is Terry from Fabric Junction in Sturgis, South Dakota. Today I'm going to show you some techniques to use on a very simple quilt. On the quilt I have hanging, I used 8-inch squares, and as you can see, they're beautiful squares. I just sewed them together to create this lovely quilt. I also used some 5-inch squares to make a doll's blanket. And this is excellent for anyone that has that 21-inch doll for their daughter, their niece, their granddaughter, whoever you have that would enjoy a doll blanket. So that is what we're doing today, simply quilting. Show you a few techniques that I use on in my quilting and how I get quilts done quite rapidly. So the first thing we need to do is lay out your blocks, which as you can see, I've got them laid out. This is the order I want them in. I start with what I consider the top and I stack them. So I can do continuous sewing or continuous piecing. Now I'm going to start on my left. Remember, just like reading, we start to the left. And I have my 2 stacks, and I sew. So I grab 2. So whenever you hear me talk about continuous piecing or continuous sewing, chain piecing, this is what I'm talking about. And all I'm doing is I'm taking the right one on my right hand over top of the left one, slipping it in the machine and sewing. Now maybe this is blocks that you've put together and you laid out and you want to put them, stitch them to each other. This is the way I do it. Once I've gotten to the bottom of my row, I bring back my top. I grab my next row. Now I'm here so I can take the right one and put it on the left. And continue. And as you can see, I stop before I get clear to the end. This gives me the space to open this one up so that I can add this one. So then when I finish, this one's ready to go. So open up, add. And I do this on all sizes of quilts. I don't care if I'm working on a queen or something this small. When I sew blocks to each other, this is the method that I use. Again, I go back to the top, open it up, take my next one, and start one more time. Now, if I was doing something that I might have a directional in there and I want to make sure I have it right, I would pause once I'm done and open it up to make sure that they're all going the same direction before I do the next step. This particular one, I don't have that concern. So I'm going to go right to my next step. which is sewing my rows together. And you can start with any one of them. A lot of times I just start with the closest one. Now here, one of the things that I do is I take those two seam allowances and I put them on top of each other, and I push one to the left and one to the right. Normally the one that's going to be on top goes left, and the one next to my feed dogs goes to the right. That way when I feed it into the machine, I can see the top one, and I know the bottom one is not going to create a problem. And I can line each one up as I go. If you have a problem lining them up, go ahead and line them up and pin them. If I was doing a large quilt, sometimes I do the left side then the right side, but this one is small enough. I'm just going to continue all the way across. Now I have to go the reverse way because I want it to line up with this. And this one is going down, so I need it to go down on this side. That means I need to watch the under one to make sure that it's facing into the machine. Over, find my piece, once again, I am using a 1/4 inch seam. For those that have not quilted and just starting, it is a 1/4 inch seam. And one more row, and I'm going to flip this one this way, and that one goes up. Up, that one's down, put them up together. Okay, once you have it sewn together, go to your ironing board and press. And I start from the back side, and you can see which way all your seams wants to go. Yep, my iron's still hot. Give it a good pressing. The last seam, press them all one direction. Your first seam, they'll go left and right on you, or up and down. And then press everything else same direction. Once I've pressed one side, I flip it over and I press the other side, because I want it to lay nice and flat. Okay, now we're going to quilt. So you have your option. You can send it to your quilter, like I did the one hanging behind me, which the in-house quilters took care of. But if you don't want to do that, you have several options. You can either machine stitch it yourself, you can tie it. There are several ways to tie it, or you can do a bar tack. And a bar tack is what I'm going to show you. If I was doing this for an adult, excuse me, I would put batting in it. So the first thing I would do is I would lay my batting down, and it would be bigger than what I need. Then I would lay my back. It also would be bigger. But on this particular one, I think my back and my top are the same, which, well, pretty close. Either way, then you lay your top. This is right sides up, this is right side down. Go through and pin it. Straight pin it, safety pin it, whatever works for you. But pin it so you have it stabilized and it won't go anywhere. So now we're going to stitch around, and you use the quilt as your guide versus your back. If you have a walking foot, you may want to use your walking foot. I'm only doing 2 layers, so I'm not going to use a walking foot. But if I had a batting in here, I would use my walking foot. Okay? 1/4 inch. And let's see. It's not all pressed. Line that up that way. There we go. The reason you want your back and your batting bigger is sometimes the quilts, as you stitch them, they stretch just a little bit. And you want to make sure that you have plenty. I get to the corner, I sew off, I just do a turn, and I'm ready to go again. And I'm going to line mine up just a little bit. There we go. Okay, you get the idea. Stitch all the way around. Once you have, I'm going to stop here on this one. Once you've stitched all the way around, leave a gap. And when I sewed, I should show you, because these are my seams, my hole was less than this. So let's turn it and flip your corner. Turn. I use my tweezers closed to bring out the corner. I'm going to move on to the one that I have here to show you how I stitch this shut. So now you have a little hole where you turned it. Here's how I tie my thread. I take the tail, I put it on the needle, I wrap it 3 times, I pull it down, and that creates my knot. I pin my hole, I slip in, if you can see, I'm going to pull that pin. I've got a tiny one here. There's where my gap is. I go from this side and I go through just 1 thread because I want to hide that knot. And it's back here, and I can push it down so nobody sees it. I stitch. I do a tiny stitch on one side and a tiny stitch on the other side. And then I go across and another small stitch straight across from where I was and back. And this hides your stitching in the quilt. And so as you go back and forth, and it's actually what I did earlier across here, because I don't like my stitches to show. I don't want people to be able to go, oh sure. Now, to start out, if you have your stitches show, that's okay. When I'm done, I take a little bitty piece, a couple of little threads, I make a loop, I put my needle through it, I pull it. This is how I tie off. Again, and I generally do it 3 times. Get one more. And then to hide my tail, I just take it inside the quilt. Let me find a spot that I can. I try to go through just inside the quilt, 1 layer. I go so far. That hides that tail so I'm not cutting off next to my knot. And I cut my thread. Now I'm going to bar tack. So pick out your zigzag stitch, change the length to 0.1. You want it really tiny, 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 because you want to almost stitch in place. Go to your machine, find your intersection, and just do a little tack. And you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's enough. Cut my thread, pick it up, go to the next intersection I want to tack down, and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's enough. I don't have to make a huge wad there, and I can just keep going and doing all my tacking. You can do that on a large quilt or a small one, whatever size you think you would enjoy doing. It's a great quick way of tacking your quilt down with your machine, and it's a beautiful quilt ready for any little girl's doll, or maybe that person that you want to make a larger quilt for. Thank you for watching. I hope you have learned a few things from our video. We do have, if you love the color here for the baby, or for the doll blanket, excuse me, we do have the 5-inch squares cut. And on the quilt behind me, which is flannel, we do have the kit cut for that one also.